Hello, this is Wayne O'Connor. Tonight I'd like to share two free verse prose poems and the beginning of a short story in my book, Waysides Along the Journey. It was originally published in 2011 by Western Star Publishing out of Cheyenne, Wyoming. The first poem in that book is entitled A Drive Through New Mexico After the Rains. Driving my 2010 Fleetwood through New Mexico, I'm thankful for my air conditioning as I make my annual journey following the spring rains to soak in the beauty of Jehovah Bore's desert landscape. Brilliant blue, crisp, and clear, the dreamlike sky is a great celestial vault that awaits the arrival of night's starry canopy. Heat rises from the Earth's surface, chased by opaque dust devils that leap into the incandescent sky. Look to the ditches and sandy arroyos. Splashes of vibrant yellow herald the desert marigolds. Flowers, fiery flares of color, rhythmic and flowing, painted in broad, bold strokes, sunflower yellows, tomato reds, and delightful oranges. Fields of delicately hued watercolors, pink and white pastels, compete with nature's more refined palette of magentas, umbers, acid greens, and smoky blacks. All are sprinkled like confetti on sugar cookies atop the sandy dunes. Dancing cactus-like bristly broadleaf yucca, with their flags of clumpy cotton balls, glaze the rolling hills, drawing buzzing bees and whirring insects to its fragrant succulence. In the distance, I see a majestic mesa, bone white at the bottom, changing to creamy red, and then blood red. She wears a coal-black crown. Her skirt of low-lying trees enclose her like green and brown-cloaked soldiers. Pinyon pines with short, smooth-needled hands, in bunches of twos and threes, softly sign the wind. Shaggy-barked junipers with overlapping scale-like twigs of leaves fan their green-gray berries. Shrubby, tangled gamble oaks twist in the moaning wind, nodding towards flaming bouquets of spiny crimson-flowered acacia that hover like a battalion of feathery-petaled yellow coreopsis. Nearby, a sea of orange globe mallows bloom atop a windswept hill and weep for the coolness of dusk. Bore, minor name of God that means the Creator. Wayne O'Connor, March 2011. Here's another poem. Passageways. I pause briefly, inhaling the dust of antiquity. Listening to the silence of the ages, I vaguely remember the echoes of my footfalls as I traverse the glassy granite floors. My thoughts rush swiftly on leopard's paws. Yesterday, no, many yesterdays ago, I felt the soft wet tickle of the morning mist and listened to the windsong symphony like tinkles of chimes in a Japanese garden. Morning stars heralded the first blade of grass. Yesterday, only a few minutes ago, yesterday, I cried. First in sorrow as the hammer pounded and the blood trickled. Not my blood, and not just for me. Second, in joy, as my Lord conquered death and sin and lived again. Today, only a second or so ago, ellipsis points. I feel my heart's thump. Strong and steady in my chest, I gaze upward unafraid at the Sphinx that looms before me. I know the answer to her riddle. I remember crawling, then walking, and presently I am at peace with the tap-tap-tapping of my cane. My lord, the curator of this museum, When last he appeared along the path, as he does prior to certain exhibits, whispered the answer to the riddle. After sharing bread and wine with me, my lord smiled warmly, then gently pressed a finely gilded cedar cane into my trembling hands. He said, "You have many more exhibits yet to see." With his sacred promise ringing in my ears, I know that the sphinxes of life may delay, but will not stop my journey. As his treasured words fade, I ponder the famous lines of Robert Browning. Come, grow old with me. The best in life is yet to be. Wayne O'Connor, February 5th, 2011. The next selection is from Chapter 8, and that chapter is entitled Adventures of Elders. The first story in this chapter is a fantasy, but it has a definite Western flair. Here is Hilbert Spaces and Zibalban Gold. Adam Caleb Kelly was old, having recently entered the venerable status accorded to septuagenarians. Tall, broad-shouldered, and lean at the waist, Adam fit the profile of a typical Western novel cowboy, nonetheless. His face no longer possessed the rakish good looks of youth, and the best of his wrinkles were the laugh lines around his eyes. Smoldering and dark blue, those eyes peered out from a high cheekbone face that was triangular in shape and ended in a strong chin. What little hair he had on his head was a scruffy salt and pepper mix, like his mustache. He had missed shaving this morning, so fine frosty stubble cloaked his chiseled, weather-beaten features. By merely donning a wig to add long hair and the Western clothes that he had temporarily exchanged for a set of navy sweats, Adam Kelly would have made a fine Marlboro man. He was still bull-strong and possessed more sand than the desert. Adam was one of those rare individuals like Emperor Otto von Bismarck who, in his old age, could wrestle young soldiers and win. When Garcia, his head foreman, rousted him from the exercise room of his old ranch house to tell him the bad news, Adam climbed out of his Nautilus rowing machine, toweled off, and scrambled into his ranch clothes. After sending Garcia for the other lead men, he called the county sheriff's office. When Sheriff Rawlings arrived in his sandstone-colored Toyota Land Cruiser, Adam and his men climbed aboard. They drove for about 30 minutes over rough winding roads, past vibrant yellow clusters of desert marigolds that danced in the ditches, before the party exited the vehicle at the first sight. As they investigated the destruction that had descended on his ranch like a proverbial biblical plague, Adam felt like a rattler in the blind. Stolen horses and cattle, dead, bloated, rotting sheep and chickens, poisoned water holes, burned sheds. Most ranchers would never have sheep or use lands with so little graze area, but with some advice from a Spanish don named Cordero, Adam's grandfather had done well with the ranch, where most said it couldn't be done. The Kelly Ranch was a desert land full of box canyons, and numerous but scattered tiny springs and small grazing plots. When Adam's grandfather had started the ranch, rustling, arson, sabotage, and feuding were to be expected, but not so much in the 1990s. If you are interested in finishing the story, it is available at Amazon.com. Either in its paperback edition or in the digital Kindle edition. Both can be found at Amazon.com. Thank you, and have a good night.